rest of the evening trying to figure out how we can win elections. I know it sounds like it's really, really, really hard, but if you can't sell freedom to people who are born out of freedom, then you don't deserve to be in this business at all. So let's get into what we can actually do to start winning some elections, because that's what all of this depends on. And in order to start talking about what we need to do right, I think the first thing we ought to do is take a quick look at what we've done wrong. Because I think that the GOP and the RNC and all of those advisors and all of those consultants are making in real time, right before our eyes, the biggest mistake in American corporate history ever. The biggest business mistake that anyone has ever made, ever, is being made right now in Washington by the leaders of the Republican Party. So let me tell you how this works. Let's say that our vision of America, our conservative vision of America, a place of hard work and good people and decent people and private property and individual responsibility and individual rights, all this stuff that we love. Let's call that Coca-Cola. Let's just call that brand Coca-Cola. And throughout the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, into the 60s in this country, every single thing that this country did was an ad for Coca-Cola. Hollywood made movies that were ads for that conservative vision of America. Every Hollywood movie was an ad for Coca-Cola. You don't even know it. Let's take a movie that doesn't seem political at all, but it's one of my all-time favorite movies. I can't watch this thing without breaking down like a little girl, honestly. Every time I watch it at Christmas, I end up crying like a little baby. Let's talk about It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life is an ad for Coca-Cola. It's a Wonderful Life is an ad for the conservatism idea of America, because It's a Wonderful Life is the story about America. Bedford Falls is America. Bedford Falls is America in miniature. And the story of It's a Wonderful Life is really pretty simple. Bedford Falls is a good place. It's a fundamentally good place. America is a good place to live. It's not a horrible nightmare of tyranny. It's a good and decent place to live. And America is a good place because of the people who live in America, in Bedford Falls. And the entire point of It's a Wonderful Life is very, very simple. It's a Wonderful Life is about one lesson only. It's a Wonderful Life is about the idea that if you take a good man, a good, decent American man, the normal American citizen, if you take him out of Bedford Falls, then Bedford Falls, America, artificially becomes a bad place, an evil place. You take the goodness out of America, and it becomes Potterville. And all the drugstores become strip joints and pawn shops and all the rest. The whole purpose of It's a Wonderful Life is to show you that at the end of the movie, George Bailey realizes that it's not about money, it's not about achievement, it's not about fame, it's not about personality, it's about character, it's about virtue, it's about all the unseen good things that come from behaving like a decent person. And so George Bailey is returned to Potterville. Potterville goes back to its natural state, which is Bedford Falls, and George Bailey is the richest man in Bedford Falls. That's an ad for everything we believe. And Hollywood used to make nothing but those kind of movies, but not today. Nowadays, in Hollywood, America's a naturally bad place, and the hero is the guy who wakes up and realizes how evil America really is. So, America made movies about Coca-Cola, about classical conservatism, and everybody bought it. Everybody in the world wanted to move here. People were ready to give up their lives to come to America and drink this conservative vision, drink Coca-Cola. Now, a lot of people say, hey, well, that conservative world that's gone. It's been gone forever. Let me clue you in. Last time we ran a conservative president, last time we ran an actual conservative Coca-Cola president, we only won 49 states. We came 5,000 votes. 5,000 votes in Minnesota of running 50 states, but we got 49. 49 out of 57 states, Mr. Obama. That's an impressive percentage. The time we ran a Coca-Cola conservative before that, a real conservative, was 1980. You only won 44 states in 1980. And for those of you who say those days are over, let me give you two little interesting pieces of information. First of all, a couple months ago, they did a kind of a fun sort of a survey, and they asked enough people for this to count. They said, if there was a head-to-head election today between Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, who would you vote for? And Ronald Reagan won with 57% of the vote. Barack Obama won with just over 50% of the vote. Ronald Reagan, who has not been on the political scene for almost 30 years, would beat Barack Obama today. And We ran a conservative election just a couple years ago. We ran a Coca-Cola conservative election in 2010 where the Tea Party rose up out of nowhere and went to Washington to stop Obamacare. That's it. That's what it was about. Conservative values, no, we don't want it. We don't want it. And what happened when we ran Coca-Cola in 2010? One of the biggest electoral flips in history. Second or third biggest flip of electoral seats in the history of the Congress. Coca-Cola sells. It sells really, really well. So, let's go back to 1960s, late 60s or so. Progressivism starts to get some traction in America. Now, I'll often talk about Democrats, but that's a mistake on my part. I don't mean Democrats. There are millions and millions and millions of loyal Democrats who love this country as much as we do. They may disagree with them certain ways of getting to what they want to do, but they love America. There are millions of them in the armed services serving right now, putting their life on the line to defend our freedom. I am not talking about Democrats at all. I'm talking about the collectivist, progressive, big state tyrants like David Axelrod, whose father was the editor of the Communist Daily in Chicago, and Rahm Emanuel, and unfortunately their disciple of Saul Alinsky, the President of the United States, Barack Obama. I'm talking about those guys. Let's call that progressive vision of America Pepsi. No offense to you Pepsi drinkers out there, by the way, but let's just call that political idea Pepsi. So, in the mid-60s, we have two things happen. Progressivism comes along, and Pepsi starts coming along, and Pepsi starts selling some drinks. Because Pepsi is very smart, and the progressives were very smart too. Both the progressives and Pepsi had the same problem. Little tiny market share and not a lot of money, not a lot of resources. So what the progressives did was the same thing as what Pepsi did. They only marketed to one small sector of the population. Pepsi marketed all of their advertising towards young people. Young people, that's all. Pepsi's the choice of a new generation. And they were smart enough to understand that if you sold Pepsi to young people and you could hang on long enough, these teenage Pepsi drinkers would start dating each other. Next thing you know, they're going to get married. And then when they go out shopping for their kids, they're going to buy Pepsi for those kids, and those kids are going to be Pepsi drinkers. It's brilliant. And that's exactly what the progressives did. They couldn't just take Marxism and communism and collectivism out into John Wayne's America. They'd be swallowed up whole. So what they did was, they went to universities and they took over faculties and they became professors. And as new students came up through the system, they radicalized those guys and they became professors, and then they radicalized high schools. And the next thing you know, we're all drinking Pepsi and we're all progressives, and it's a very, very effective story. Now to the point. Now to the point. So, what did Coca-Cola have done? While Pepsi is gaining more and more market share, more and more people are drinking Pepsi, what did Coca-Cola do? Did they take their superior ad revenues and say, hey man, Coca-Cola is the most popular drink in the world. The Coke bottle is the most iconic shape in the world. You draw that Coke bottle, you don't have to put a label on it. Everybody knows what it is. Coca-Cola is the biggest brand on the planet. The logo hasn't changed since 1886, I think, when they started it. Pepsi's logo changes every year. They can't get their act together. Why didn't they get out in front of the country and say, yeah, Pepsi's okay, I guess we don't have the money for Coke. I mean, you know, nobody goes to a restaurant and says, can I have a Pepsi? Sorry, we only have Coke. Coke is a prestige brand. Did they get behind Coke? They did not. In 1985, Coca-Cola blinked. They panicked. They panicked. And you know what they did? They took the most popular drink on planet Earth off the shelves. You couldn't buy it for love or money. And they replaced it with New Coke, which tastes a lot more like Pepsi. How'd that work out for her? How did it work out? It was the biggest disaster in history. It was the biggest disaster in marketing history. Because the Coca-Cola drinkers couldn't get Coca-Cola. They didn't like this new stuff. This stuff tastes so much like Pepsi. I hate Pepsi. The Pepsi drinkers didn't like it. They're drinking Pepsi. They don't give a damn about this new Coke stuff. And somebody please tell me that that's not what's going on exactly right now with the Republicans at the top level of this party. They're taking conservatism towards liberals. Let's make it a little more liberal. Let's make it more like liberalism. Let's take conservative candidates off the market so that you can't buy them, and let's make all our guys look and sound more like the progressives. Well, it's an utter mystery why we lose elections. No one can figure it out. I think Mitt Romney was probably the best qualified candidate, and certainly had the best moral character of anybody since George Washington. But, yeah, he's a great man. He was a great, great man. But he couldn't even sell his own life story. We had an election where we had a choice between the guy who invented Obamacare and the guy who implemented Obamacare. And millions of conservatives, Coca-Cola drinkers, said, That's Coke. I'm sorry, that's not Coke. That's Pepsi and New Coke. I don't like either of them. I'm sitting this one out. I tried to tell them not to, but they didn't listen to me. So, if we're going to win elections, we've got to get back to Coca-Cola. We've got to get back to the most popular brand on the planet. And we need to be proud of it, and we need to be in front of it, and we need to be singing its praises as loud as we can, because it is, in fact, today, still the #1 product in the world. So, I said earlier that historical forces are at work making these Democrats in real big trouble. And you're going to have to give me a 2-minute little break here, because I got to make a point. It's an important point that you understand this, because time is on our side. It's not on their side. Time is on our side. Because there's only been 3 things that have ever happened in all of human history that matter. Only 3 things that have ever really happened that really matter in all of human history. There's been hundreds of nations and scores of empires and diseases and wars and plagues and petulance and all this other stuff, but there's only been 3 things that really matter. The first thing that ever happened that really changed everybody's life happened about 7,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in ancient Sumeria, which is now modern-day Iraq, happily enough. The first big thing in human history happened. People realized, probably by accident, that a certain kind of grass would grow, and that if you ground these seeds down and put them in an oven, it would create a kind of a food, and you could grow so much of this food by growing this grass that one guy could feed hundreds of people. It's called agriculture. It's called farming. And prior to that, every single one of you would have to go out every single day and either catch or trap or gather enough food to get you through the day. But once you invent agriculture, one guy can feed hundreds of people. That's why the farmer is always the first person in civilization. Because if a farmer can grow enough food for other people, that means that other people don't have to grow their own food. And that means now you can have a poet, and a musician, and a doctor, and a priest, and a scientist, and a lawyer. So it's not entirely all good, but as a general rule, it's got its advantages. So the invention of agriculture was the first big thing that happened. And if you think about it, everything we love about our government, as we understand it as conservatives, everything we love about this document, the Constitution, is a result of the fact that this document was designed for an agricultural society. This document, the federal government, as it was originally written, was designed for a nation that lived on farms. What do farmers have in common? They're self-reliant, they're independent, they take care of themselves, they want to be left alone. So what did the federal government look like as written originally? Why do we like it? Well, it's far away, it's unintrusive, it's not expensive, it's small, it's limited, and really all it does is build us a navy to keep the British away, build us an army to keep the Indians and those warlike Canadians from coming back down on us, maybe pave the road from the marketplace to the farm. We'll have a discussion about that, but otherwise that's it, it's done, leave it alone. And that limited government that we all love is a result of an agricultural society. So, 7,000 years ago, the invention of agriculture. The second big thing that happened to people happened about 300 years ago. Right after the Civil War, end of the 1800s, early 1900s, really started to get into the swing of things. The second big thing happened, and that was the Industrial Revolution. Now, contrary to what the President of the United States might tell you, it wasn't that the government just sat down and said, we need to send some people out there to invent the steam engine. Let's get some committees working on the internal combustion engine and get this industrial revolution going. It didn't happen like that. They did build it, as it turns out. They did.